I've gone ahead and played a couple of the scenarios from North Africa 41, and I'm going to go ahead and call the campaign at this point. I've played through up into 11 turns. The summer turns go pretty quickly because you only have 2 impulses for each side throughout the summer months. That's turns 8 through 13. So those turns do tend to go a little bit quicker. Plus, there's more, shall we say, passing going on in some of these impulses because of the need to build up more attack supply. But in our particular game here, the Allies, mismanaged the Allies, I think, pretty badly. I'm not going to credit all of this to luck of the dice. In some cases, I just got a little too aggressive, too reckless with the Allies, and it cost them big time. So there's just an enormous amount of carnage in the eliminated units pile, and we're at a state now in the game where I'm looking at the victory score. And sorry for the glare. So we're sitting at 6 VPs. And 12 is an auto victory. And how you're getting the victory points is you're looking at the threshold beneath the turns. Most of the turns have a threshold of 3 VPs. What that means is you have to have at least 3 airfields captured as the Germans in order to avoid losing a point. If you have more than 3, then the differential is number of victory points you gain. And right now the Allies have, or the Axis has 4 airfields. Crete does not count. You only count the airfields on the North Africa theater. So they've been holding on to 4 airfields now for, 5 turns. They picked up a point early. I think it was turn 2, either 2 or 3. They picked up a point early. I think it was turn 2. They grabbed the airfield up here quickly. I should have garrisoned that with a battalion, but I failed to do that as the Allies. So gave them a point there. And then things just kind of went downhill as the Allies. I just made some crucial mistakes. And I think the biggest ones was when we left a big one of these killer stacks that has tanks and everything in it, and left them isolated enough on the edge of the front line that enabled the Germans to maneuver around and set up killing situations where there's no Zachbond rules in North Africa 41, but the retreat rules do use Zachbond concepts. And so I was able to send some armored car detachments around the backside to cut off any retreat paths and basically effectively kill whole stacks of units. Decided to weather the storm, play it out, see how it works, and see if, I figured if the Allies could retake Sidi Barani airfield on turn 11, that they're still in the game. There's still a chance they can come back from this, because the Axis supply situation, frankly, is abysmal. They're having a real difficult time now that the Tobruk garrison has brought some units outside of the fortified zone and have started to put pressure on the tank-less Italian units that have basically masked Fortress Tobruk. What this has done is it slowed down even more the route of supplies from Benghazi. Plus, the Malta situation has gotten pretty bad. So the result of the Malta situation is you get a +2 modifier to this table here. And when you roll on this table, that's to determine whether guys from Italy can make it over to Tripoli, or if you pay a resource for it, to Benghazi. And it's getting harder and harder for the Axis to send supplies and units from Italy to Benghazi. It's getting harder and harder to schlep things all the way to the front line. So the supply situation for the Axis is reaching a critical point. So they're going to have to start pulling back. However, I kind of set it up so they could kind of hinge on this fortified position here and hopefully swing like a door as much as possible to hold on the airfield as much as is possible to rack up more points. Well, the attack on this fortified position failed. The determined defense was successful and enough to kill the Matildas that were there. And I've got one very good Panzer battalion in a reserve position. So it was actually the Axis first impulse of turn 11. And they have just enough supply to go ahead and pull this guy around and basically clobber the heck out of this particular stack and pretty much make it impossible for the Allies to capture City Barani by the end of the turn. What that's going to mean is when we get to the victory point phase of the turn, this is going to move up to 7. And so you only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 turns to get those 7 points back, and then plus move it over to the positive side for the Allies. That's very, very unlikely, especially since they're going to lose the Australians. It's going to be harder to hold on to Tobruk. I just don't envision the Allies being able to get out of this jam. They might be able to restore things as far as Solemn and the escarpment here near the original international border, but it's unlikely that they're going to be able to achieve a victory here. So, thoughts on the game. I haven't played the Operation Crusader game, which is a shorter game. It's a 3-turn game. It's probably the shortest scenario in the game. It's turns 17, 18, 19. It's kind of the end game. And I think that if we're going to play the campaign, it's probably a smart idea to play the introductory scenario, or the first scenario, I should say, which takes you up through turn 7. And then maybe play this game before doing the campaign, just to get a sense for where, give you a benchmark for where things should be in order to play the campaign game perhaps more successfully than I've managed to do. So I think the next thing I want to do is try that shorter scenario, but thought I would give some feedback on the game. First of all, if you have played any of Mark's other games like Ardennes 44, Ukraine 43, Sicily 43, Stalingrad 42, or any other of these 40X games, these are really solid designs. This one, I'm trying to remember if any of the others do not use the Zachman concept. This one is the first one I can think of that doesn't use it per se, but the principles are still, as I said, part of the retreat rules. This game might be some people's go-to for North Africa. It really is a solid game. I love how supply works in the game. Supply lines are important. Just moving this guy out, this is a choke point for your supply lines for the Axis. And what I mean by that is there's two kinds of concepts in supply. There's general supply, where you just need to get a supply route that can be 5 hexes long over any basic type of terrain. Over ordinary terrain, I should say. There are some exceptions to that. But you can go overland to a road. A road is defined as a track or a highway. And then from there, it can't touch any enemy Zach unless it's neutralized by the presence of a unit, and be able to trace all the way back to a supply source, which is ultimately going to be the edges of the map for either side. So that's how you stay in supply. But in order to engage in attacks, you need supply points in order to attack effectively. What I mean by that is you can't use more than 9 attack factors. So the combat strength here of this battalion is 9. So if I had a whole bunch of guys stacked with them, if I don't have attack supply points to draw from, I can't use them at full capability. Furthermore, you don't get the armored tank shifts in combat. And what those do is they move your odds up. Say you had enough points to get 1-to-1 odds, but you have really good tanks and the opponent has none, you could get all the way over to 3-to-1 odds with that shift. Well, without attack supply, you don't get to use those tank shifts. So there's a number of limitations. You can do low-grade combat without spending these precious supply points. It starts off in the game, you have a ton of these, it feels like, but you're going to burn through them really quickly, because every single attack you do, with the exception of breakthrough combat, is going to burn these things. So you need to make sure that you pay attention to how much supply you have on hand. Supply depots have a range of 3 hexes. That means that they can supply an attack within 3 hexes of that depot. Now, if you have those guys attached to a truck unit, the truck unit basically becomes a mobile supply unit. So if I move this truck that has no supply, if I move him into where this depot is, he would basically take the depot away and become a MSU. And that MSU has a range of 5, so he can supply a lot further to your front lines. But this imposes an interesting decision on the player because the Axis only has 4 of these trucks. So I can use those trucks to basically make these Italian regiments a motorized regiment. And there's reasons you want to do that. If your units are not motorized and they're forced to retreat more than 2 hexes in a combat, they will be captured. They will be surrendered. That's a big deal. Plus, they can't do any breakthrough combat like you want to do. So it's an important thing to get them motorized if they're going to be on the front lines in any kind of attacking capacity. But you have to balance your need for schlepping supply to fuel your attacks with the need to motorize certain regiments and so forth. So there's some very interesting decisions to make. And this is also especially true for the Allies because you have a lot of units like these. The Indian Brigade here is not motorized, so I've got him paired up with trucks. And I found myself, even though the Allies have more trucks to play with, I think they have 5 at this point, I found myself having to motorize an increasing number of units in order to stay competitive in the field, and it was getting harder and harder to have a supply network that could fuel an offensive. I could fuel localized counterattacks, but with depots, you really can't just advance rapidly across the desert. You're going to need to have trucks that are moving supply in a more dynamic fashion. So I really like that part of the game because it's not a whole lot of bean counting on the player. There's not a lot of counting things out. It's not an exercise in accounting, but it's something that you realistically have to pay attention to. The cool thing about the trucks is you can pick them up from anywhere on the map if they haven't moved yet and move them back to your main supply base box like Tripoli in order to pick up supplies that have been dropped off there, and then you can start trucking it across the desert. The map has got little movement point indicators on it that give you a very quick and easy way to count, because they move it at one quarter of a movement point along the highway, so you can really quickly count how far they can go in any movement phase. There is ways that you can delay the passage of units along highways. There's a phase of the game in each impulse where you put delay markers down on the board, and then you roll 2 dice. If you roll the number that matches a delay marker, it gets removed. And so there's all kinds of things that can get in the way of your opponent's moving troops and logistics across the map. I feel like this game really does a great job of balancing the combat and the movement and the strategy and the tactics and the maneuver side operationally, but includes enough of the logistics to make you think about the things that the historic counterparts in the North Africa campaign had to consider and keep in their minds. So I really am enjoying this one. I need to play it a little bit more. I need to rethink my strategy as the Allies, but this is one, if you haven't picked up North Africa 41, I highly recommend it. I've never played a Mark Simonitch game I didn't enjoy, and this one here is proving no exception. So I'm Joel Tappan. This is North Africa 41. Hope you enjoy the video. Hope you enjoy this game.